Hey guys, so this would be our first screencast for use case one, and our bot is DockerBot, which and in this particular use case, we'll cover the points of that as soon as the user starts a conversation with the DockerBot would ask him for a valid GitHub URL where we have all our application code placed, and as per the mocking service we have given, we only have two valid GitHub URLs with which we'll test. Any other GitHub URL will fail. That's one thing to notice. And other than that, even if you don't give a GitHub URL altogether, if you try to give a, let's say, a Google link, it will fail in that case as well. So we'll be testing that. And next, once you give the GitHub URL, it will ask you for a startup file name, which is basically the chunk of code of the application you want to deploy. So again, we have two possible file names with us right now, test.py and app.py. Again, these are all mocked services. There's no actual code application running in the backend. This will come up in our next milestone. So we'll run this test case, Selenium test case, and see how it goes. We'll cover two good parts and two bad parts. There's no order on how it will come. So let's see. I'll try to guide you on this. So the bot starts. The test case will start the bot conversation, and the bot will ask for a valid GitHub URL. So we give him a valid URL. This one is a valid URL, and it successfully processed the repository and asked for a startup file name. There's a sleep time we have given in between the conversation. So okay, we give him the name test.py, which is again one of those valid files, and this note which you see, the requirements.txt, is basically part of a use case tool where we ask the user to add on any dependencies he wants to add. So this was one of our good test case where we gave a valid GitHub URL and a valid startup file name as well. Let's see what it comes up next. So it resets the connection, starts an altogether new conversation. Now we give him another valid URL for GitHub, and once it's processed, it asks us for a valid startup file name. So we give him a bad file name this time, gg.py, and this actually becomes our alternate path, the bad part, where the bot errors out saying that you have to give the absolute path to a good file name. So we reset, start a conversation with the bot, give him a URL which is a valid one, and now we'll give him the file name, the startup file name. So we give him a valid startup file name, and it goes through, it asks for any other dependencies, and so one more, that last one was a good path scenario. Now there's one last bad path scenario where we'll not give a valid GitHub URL link altogether, other than the two of them which we have done. So we reset, start the conversation, and rather than giving the valid URL, we give the course website URL for GitHub, and it says repo not found. So Eclipse is showing a correct successful output, and this is our screencast for use case one. Okay, we shall continue with our screencast for use case 2 now, and this is actually for checking whether it's not actually we're just giving an option to a user whether he wants to add any other dependencies before we finally proceed on to making a Docker file and lock out all the options for the user. So the first thing which will happen in this video, in this screencast, will be that we'll give a valid GitHub URL, we'll give a valid the startup file name, and the user will add the dependencies he wants to add other than the one he mentions in requirements.txt. So, and the other alternate path we'll go through is that we'll give a valid GitHub URL, a valid startup file name, but the user would not add any dependency, so he'll answer no on that question. And in that case as well, bot will go ahead and create the Docker file and eventually make the image. So we'll run this test case. Let's see what's happening. Okay, so let's see where which function it hits for Selenium test case 2. So it resets the connection, starts the conversation, gives a valid URL for GitHub, and I'll give a valid startup file name as well. Okay, now there's this question asked about, do we want to add any other dependencies or not, just before we finally create a Docker file. So let's see which case it takes this time. So we do give two other dependencies, name paramico and telnetlib, and it uses these two dependencies, makes a note of them, and successfully creates a Docker file and the image. In test case 3, we'll tell you how this forwards on this data to the AWS account where we will push this. Okay, now it should show us the alternate path where we do not give any dependencies to add on. Give a valid URL for GitHub, a valid file name coming up as well. Now we'll answer saying no, that we don't want to add any other dependencies, and it won't add any other changes, and we just go on for creation of Docker file and a Docker image. So this is our Selenium test case alternate path for case 2. So it does it, and we can see the green status bar which shows that the test case was successful. So let's go on to our Selenium test case 3, which is for our AWS mocking service. Again, we'll start off from the same point. We'll give a valid GitHub URL, we'll give a valid startup file name, we'll give the extended dependencies which we want to add on to the Docker file. The bot will then create the Docker file and the image later on, and will try to deploy it onto the AWS cloud. Since we are mocking this service as of now, we'll show it later on in our next milestone on how the interaction actually happens. Right now, we're just asking the user for the access ID, the secret key, and the user ID for logging into the AWS cloud. As I said, we'll later on check our options on how do we want to make this connection happen, like just based on username, password, credentials, or actually use some API to log into the AWS cloud service. So once there's some restrictions on the access ID and the secret key. Like access ID has to be 20 characters long, and the secret key has to be 40 characters long, and the user ID has to be a 12-digit number. Once we give all these parameters to the bot, it will use them and go and create a repo onto our ECR image, onto our ECR repository. ECR is nothing but the Elastic Container Repository service provided by the AWS. So this will be our good path where we'll be deploying a Docker image to the repo as we specify. The bad path or the alternate path would just be that the user didn't match up to the all these requirements of user ID or the secret key. So we'll keep less than 20 characters for user access ID or less than 40 characters for the secret key, and that will be a bad path for us. In this case, we provide an access ID which is just 4 characters long, and it should fail there. So let's run our test case. There'll be two options. Let's see which one comes up first. So it gives a valid URL. So now it'll ask us for the AWS credentials, and we'll provide them. Let's see which one comes up first, the valid one or the invalid one. Okay, so we give a valid access ID, 20 characters long, give a valid secret key, which is 40 characters long, and we'll give a valid user ID, which is 12 numeric digits long. So the credentials have matched upon, and we now need to provide a valid repo name where we want to deploy the image onto the AWS ECR. So test is the repo name which we have given. It already exists there, so we'll use the same repo name for deployment, and the Docker image has been successfully deployed. This marks a good case of for test case 3. So this should be our alternate path for use case 3. It resets the connection, provides the right URL. Let's see how it goes through. a valid startup file name test.py, the dependencies paramico and telnetlib, and now comes the part where we will give an invalid access ID. Okay, so we give an invalid access ID since it's only 4 characters long, and it gives you an error there saying that it's not valid, and this marks our alternate path for test case 3. The Eclipse status bar clearly shows that it's successful. Thank you, guys.